Great. Yeah, we've got some attendees coming
Should
in.
we? Yeah.
Let's just get it going. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you
Let's
everyone for
do
coming to the
intros.
first open video called 2020 Artist Discussion with Sonnie Wooden. I'm Michael Ipsen.
I'm Matthew Ober.
I'm Sonnie
And today we'll be, yeah, there's Sonnie. And we'll be having a pretty free-form discussion today. Hopefully everyone has seen Sonnie's work, Godspeed. If not, you can check that out on the ICA Philadelphia website. And we also have closed captions today, so you can go click that button in the bottom right of your Zoom screen, and the closed captions should pop up. So thank you very much to Beth for doing those captions. And thank you very much for everyone at the ICA for making this possible. Sonnie, is there anything you want to start with?
Thank you for everyone coming. When I was in undergrad in 2013 at Columbia College Chicago, I used to like imagine myself being interviewed one day, and like this is like the first time. This is the first time, like for real. So I really appreciate it. Shout out Philly.
Awesome.
Shout out the ICA.
Yeah.
And shout out Lino Kino, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, we're glad you're the first one too, because I think it's going to be a very productive discussion.
Oh yeah.
We had some pre-discussions that went really great, and we touched on a lot of different subjects. I think your work is really rich and full of a lot of complex, multi-layered meaning. So I don't think we'll have a lack of things to talk about.
Yeah.
So to start, I guess, are you in Chicago right now?
Yeah, I'm back home. I moved home about a week and a half ago. My lease was ending in like 2 weeks, so I just thought I should get out of Dodge, like readjust myself. And then I think the cool thing about coming home is that you run into your like people from high school. And if you don't have anything going on in your life, when you run into people at high school, you're like, oh, I got to get it together now. So I kind of like moved home to put pressure on myself. Because right here, just like a 1-bedroom, and my sister's at my dad's. So I stay in her room. But like if she comes back, it's just like we have a like issue with space. So the whole thing is like trying to get my gears back running, you know, or at least try to find some work. But yeah, I'm here. I'm looking at my Fred Moten book from here. But yeah, nice. I'm just back in the city, driving around, thinking.
Yeah,
Midwestern.
That's awesome. I feel like home is such a huge part of Godspeed. And I think that'd be a good segue just to start by talking about like what home means to you, and like because in the film there's it's a journey, you know, it's got the plane ride at the beginning and the end, and there's like multiple crossing of thresholds throughout. So if you could just talk about like, I guess, home.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. Home was always something I wanted to get away from. Growing up, I always wanted to get out of Chicago. I never wanted to stay. By the time I was 19, like 2 of my friends were like shot and killed. And they were like the friends that you were like real cool with, like at school. You were like your school friends where you'd be walking around school and you see one another, they would chop it up for a little bit, have a conversation. And when they were like such an integral part, and I didn't realize that until afterwards. And when they were gone, I was just like, okay, this place is getting kind of crazy. And both of them were misidentified for people they weren't, right? So that was really tough for me. And being here, I just had to go. And once I left, I was able to like stop and look at Chicago and look at my life more like just critically. Like I was just like, okay, like why am I built this way? Right? Like I'm built like my mom, which is really like, I'll go into that later, but I'm built like my mom. I'm just like, okay, like I'm the smallest person in my family. Like what's happening here where like when I leave here and I go to like these other neighborhoods and like Winnetka and Kenilworth, like people don't look like me and people don't look this way. So I really grew up in a very like insular way where like Blackness was never a thing to think about. Like my dad and my mom they're both Black. We were living in a working class town. So I really gravitated toward like class things and trying to figure out like what these things meant. Like we had the classic like working class home had like the aquarium and like the big screen TV, you know what I mean? My dad had a Ford Explorer and like a basketball hoop in the little driveway. But then I didn't realize it was working class until I was like, wait, there's also a landfill down the street. There's also like a cemetery right there. There's also like no transit here, you know, unless it's like Pace, and like people who are familiar with Chicago, Pace is like not the CTA. It's like it connects, Pace connects the suburbs to the CTA in a way. So I will also go into the inner city a lot. So none of my environments were ever normalized for me. So it was just like, it was always like 4 to 5 year increments of like moving into different spaces. So every 4 years was like something different. And I remember being in kindergarten and like having like very vivid memories of trying to be like my dad. And then growing up and going to the west side of Chicago more, and then turning like 13, 14 and going into like Oak Park where Ernest Hemingway and like Frank Lloyd Wright's house is. And then 4 more years, I was like hanging out in like Lincoln Park and the Gold Coast and all these like very like wealthy areas. And then 4 years after that, it's like I live in Iowa. So none of my environments were ever like stable. So I was like really weirdly housing insecure in some ways. That really like threw off my equilibrium. So nothing seemed off limits because nothing was ever fixed. Nothing was ever static.
Right. The limits weren't set. Yeah.
Right. And my dad's like very curious. He's like a cinephile. So he was always like calling me out of school early to go to like car shows. So like rules around like going to school all the time, it didn't like apply to my mind. He was just like, you'll be fine. You'll figure it out. And I'm like, okay, yeah, of course I do. And we'll go. And like, I was always in these spaces that I was the only one, and it got really normal. So home was always like on the road. It's my car more than anything. I'm more comfortable in my car than in anyone's house. At least there, like I can escape. I can always escape in my car, and I can also live there, and I have, and like, I don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
Well, there's definitely a lot of driving in Godspeed. I think it kind of ties together the different vignettes throughout the piece. So I think it makes a lot of, I mean, it really is a perfect encapsulation of what you just described. You have the different homes that we're in the piece. We have the restaurants, hanging out with the friends, and then it's all threaded together by driving on the highway and seeing the Chicago skyline. So it does have this, even though it is kind of looking at home and reflecting on home, it's very mobile, right? And I think it's exactly what you just said. It's home is not exactly a fixed thing. It is kind of what you make of it in your present circumstance.
Right. And it's also like,
there's like
go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just gonna say there's, yeah, jumping on what Michael said, there's like a transience to it that is something that really drew me in. Like they're like a searching kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Yeah, continue.
I mean, yeah, I think artists are always searching, right? We don't know what we're looking for 90% of the time, but we know when we find it. And that kind of transience is like weird because that's what I'm most comfortable in. And it's been my downfall countless times. And it's been my largest downfall in relationships because it's like, I'm so used to moving and I'm like, I'm just going to go. And just like, I remember 2 relationships ending because I went to college and like transferred to whatever. And it was just like really complex because it's like, well, I have to leave. And like, I know the life I live you only get like so many carry-ons, like there's like the car only fits so many people. And it was just like me, my baggage, and that's it. And I got to go. But also like the Chicago skyline, fits in a lot because it's also like a weird, they also call it the city of like big shoulders or whatever. And like the way the Sears Tower is like, well, Willis Tower is built is like kind of like this,
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of just like broad and it's just like looking. And I always looked at it as like more of a figure than an actual building. And it has this weird like panoptic relationship to the city itself, where it's like, it's all seen, right? And if you're on the other side of the lake, on like the Michigan side, you can actually see the Sears Tower on a like clear day. So it's always watching, and it's always been like a kind of like this like Zora Neale Hurston moment for me, where like I can't remember like the house you always go to, but it was always kind of like watching her. Mm-hmm. And I always felt like Chicago was watching me. And every time I come back, I'm like, I have to get out of here. Like something's watching me. And the kind of like the way it just looks down on the city, and it's really spooky at night because it has form, and it doesn't necessarily have like a corporeal shape, but it has shoulders, which then implies it has a body, right? It's kind of like a character from Minecraft almost.
And it has antennas too. It has like sensory organs.
Yeah, so it's like this scientific, like sci-fi thing that's always been there to me, where it's like, like when I fly in, like I just finished my photo book and I took a couple of pictures like aerial in the city. It's just like, it's the thing, right? And it also was the world's largest skyscraper for a long time. And its broadness is very, very much a definition of like a kind of Midwestern like hardiness, but also deeply existential simultaneously. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you said like when you're in Chicago, you feel like the need to leave or like a repulsion. And that kind of reminds me of the last scene in Godspeed, which is you're talking, I don't know who it is, but you're talking to this guy and he's kind of like saying, he's thinking about, you know, leaving Chicago for good. And like, that's the note, that's like the final note of the film. And then we're in the plane and we're leaving. I think that's really, you want to talk about that, like encounter or that scene?
Yeah, that's my dad.
Oh, that's your dad. Okay.
Yeah, that's my dad, which is we look very much alike. And I remember just like filming and like we're just in George's, which is like this restaurant, Oak Park, and like I really like it. And we went. It was just night. It was like winter. It was snowing a little bit. It was just like the stillness in the air was very crisp. It's just like when like the wind hits the back of your throat, you just a little bit. You know, it's one of those nights. And we're just him and I like eating some soup and like some like home fries and stuff, like very like thick, hearty food. And he just started like getting into this like stream of consciousness of like, yeah, man, like I'm tired of being here. Like I can't do this no more. And I'm just like, is this where I get like this existential, like I got to get out of here kind of thing? So my parents have been like more interesting to me and like more fascinating, but also more like accessible than anything I've ever done in grad school. And like this film, like I think this film like in many ways saved my life in grad school, and in many other ways it got me through. And I initially made it as a way to like remind myself of home, because I was so far away. Like I'm the only one in my family to like get a college degree, and seeing my dad's face when I came back, and I was like, the only reason I'm getting a college degree is to have more options, right? And like a large part of that we have in the Black community is our inability to actualize or self-determine by our own like our own will, right? Because of so many constant interdictions by the state, the community, racism, sexism, homophobia, all these like, you know, transphobia, all these things that are constant interdictions on people, right? But within poor people, once you add a sort of like, once your identity becomes more complex, it becomes like constant interdictions. And I'm looking at my dad and I'm like, oh wait, this is actually for you too, in many ways, where I have to like, somehow I'm being interdicted by my school because I didn't know anything my first year. Like this is the first real thing I made. Like this is like quite honestly my real first film, but I've always like dabbled a little bit. And it was just like a way to stabilize myself. It's just like, okay, like I can do this now. Like I have home, I can always watch it. It feels good to watch. And like my cousin yelling like, what is Tanisha doing? And it's just like, yeah, that's how he is. And it like reminds me of home. So I'm just like, okay, this can push me through. But then as I went through grad school, it starts to get more and more complex about Black aesthetics and cinema and the apparatus theory and things like that.
And yet the first video that you made still, it seems like it still continues to fit into all these ideas that you've addressed in your later work. So, I mean, it seems like you kind of really got it right the first time in a really impressive way.
Thanks. And we're going to watch, I think we're going to watch, just for everyone, we're going to watch a clip from Sonnie's film Guillotine later on in the talk, but there's a lot of connections, you know, between the two.
Yeah. And you've mentioned first a lot so far, how you're the first person from your family to get a college degree, how Godspeed was the first video you made. So can you maybe speak a little bit more to the experience of all of those firsts and how that was, I mean, that's like a big thing to overcome in a lot of ways, the kind of like doubt that you have about like doing something for the first time.
Yeah, I think being the first it's also like it's an incredible amount of pressure. And like even like Childish Gambino or like Donald Glover, whatever you want to call him, talks about like Black people's inability to have a safe place to fail, right? There's no sort of failure that we're allowed to have. And a lot of times I think when you have more and more like wealth, it gives you like more and more cushion to fall, right? To be okay.
Yeah, it gives you the golden parachute.
Right. You have yeah, exactly. You have a sort of parachute. And the thing that was with me was just like the pressure. It was constant and constant and constant pressure. And that first was also very like relieving, because going to school, like my parents didn't like know very much about like syllabus and like the advisor and things like that, which also became a strength for me because I could spin it whichever way I needed. Like as long as I knew what I needed and I can like articulate that, it'll be fine. And it was just like, oh wait, like I don't have a map. Like no, there's no one who can tell me who I am before I become who I want to be, right? Which is great, because I look at some of my friends who may have like more capital than I do. They're kind of in the shadow of like their father or their mother in a way, where they have to like, they're like, okay, I have to do this and I have to do this and I must do that. And I have to make everyone proud and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I don't have that. Just the fact that I exist in a sort of space as the first allowed me and afforded me a sort of position. But it's incredibly hard though to be on your own. Like my dad says this line, keep doing what you're doing, man. Keep doing what you're doing. And that's kind of like, keep raising yourself. Keep doing it. I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. And it's just like, yeah, okay, like what does that mean? But he that's also his way of saying, like my family's very nonverbal. That's also his way of saying like, you know what you need, just keep doing it. Because you know I don't know how to get you those things in like a very short, it's just like a shorthand for a lot of things. So being the first was crazy. And being the first in grad school was another beast. And like I'll talk about that a little bit later. Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about this a bit in our previous conversation, but where the meeting of art and business, I think, is something that you have a lot of familiarity with. You went to school for business, right? Or you studied business in some respect.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And there's this one line right at the beginning of Godspeed, where you've just entered the house and you're talking. I think it's your mother or someone. You're talking to them, and you say, "Hopefully they give me some money." You're talking about the project that you're filming, like the Godspeed, and you say, "Hopefully they give me some money." So that's just immediately situating, your art in capital, in business. So yeah, what is that relationship of art and money to you? I mean, that's a big question. Maybe what is?
No. I think it's a great question, because I didn't expect us to talk about it, but I should have expected it because I talk about it so often. I guess this is real life. You know what I mean? Like, I never had this kind of luxury not to worry about money. Like my mom's in banking. She's not like in investment banking, but she's always been very frugal. She's always been very careful. My mom knows how to rob Peter to pay Paul very well. Like it's always been at the front of my mind. So I go in, like, it's not possible to come from like where my family comes from and go into like a field that's not that capital intensive, but your ceiling or your trajectory is very, very like long until you make any sort of capital sustain yourself. And to do that it's wild. That's why you don't see many like I guess I have to talk about it because it's just I have to make a living. Like this notion of art that is not implicated by capital or rich people or any of those things is just false. And that was like my biggest gripe with grad school, right? Where it was just like, I'm about to pay all this money for this degree and you can't tell me the ROI on it. That's a problem for me, right? Like, what is that? I know what my ROI is when I go to a restaurant. I'm going to get delicious food and maybe some good hospitality, but you can't tell me what an MFA is going to do for me. So, but I later found out what it could do and what I can do with it. And like, I had to do all those things on my own, but I make things that can be put on hard drives, books, boxes very quickly. I can move very quickly. Like when I told me I had to move out of my studio, it took me like 5.5 minutes because I'm like, I need this, and this. These are all things I borrowed from the school. Leave them, I'm out. And like that's the life of like an artist now, where it's just like you're adjuncting here, and here. You got to go do this, and this, and that's just a reality. But in my situation, like I can't separate them because I've just seen like I can't really talk about it because it's like that's also a part of the art world, right? There's like things that you can go do and see that you can't talk about. But once you see enough like things on walls that are on walls that of people that don't look like you, or people have access to the things that like my family hasn't been, you know, to the Art Institute with me, but like I've been with other people's families, you know, so it's like that relationship is very hard. But then I look at the model very differently, and I struggle to talk about it because it's just super complex when money enters the art world, because we're like the Wharton people, we're like the business school people, but in a different way. We're like our virtue signaling is almost like our thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like burn down all these things, but I'm going to go hang out at Gagosian, you know? That's weird. And it's hard not to think about those things as weird. And I went to school at the University of Chicago for a year, and they tried to sell me a dream. And I was like, are there business classes here? And they're like, no, don't worry about that. I was like, I'm inherently an entrepreneur. I'm making things that will go to market one day, and you can't tell me how to like account. That's a problem. So
yeah, it's a weirdly kind of like financially blind approach that you get a lot.
Yeah.
And it's also I mean, the difficulty is that, you know, you can't, like, developing a practice doesn't pay the bills. Like that's a reality that a lot of people have to contend with, especially if you're not coming from a position where you have the financial capital to kind of like to float your artistic practice, you know, until you get to that point where you start making money. And I think that is something that is, in art education is not talked about enough. And that is indicative of a lot of things, a lot of problems in the arts.
Exactly. And when you look at it, it's just like, it's, if you look up Deloitte asset class art, there's a whole like financial, like breakdown, pitch deck, you know, slide deck, whatever you want to call it, about art as a new asset class. It's just an unproductive asset that supposedly would hopefully give you more than 8.5% from what, more than that, because that's all the stock market gives you year over year, right? So hopefully you get some artist who gets hot, and then you can flip it in about 3 to 5 years for like at least 2x, 3x, and then you're off to the races, right? But the problem with me is just like, I look at the music industry where like I can't buy back my masters. You know, like there's no like masters and like hard goods, right? So if I have hard goods, I can't make that many of them because it's also predicated on a scarcity model. It's also a luxury good for a lot of people. And that's where I started to get like very sad and jaded, because I'm making luxury goods, but then I had to change my practice to fit who I used to be, like who I was as a kid. Like I watched so many films with my dad. I had access to magazines. It was mainly TVs and magazines where like they were a lower cultural barrier to entry. Like I remember Chappelle Show for me was like the biggest cultural thing to ever hit the TV. And he made money, it made an impact, and it's by far one of the greatest sketch shows ever. And I think it's just a terrible thing that so into artists, they can't make money. Granted, like capitalism's capitalism and it's terrible, but how do we live? Like the same people who hate capitalism also can't eat. Like how do we, but also, I don't know. I've been reading a lot of VC stuff lately from the Silicon Valley, and it's just like, like, what game are we going to play? Like, what decisions do we make as artists? Like, honestly, like, what decisions do we actually make about the world? Other than, like, trying to allocate enough human capital to go in a direction that's for the better good. Like, that's fine. We can do those things. But also, you're going up against Charles Koch and his brother, who have billions of dollars that are just lobbying on the Hill all day, every day. How do you beat that? How do we get sustained change in those ways? So for me, it's always been about the convergence of the two. The market gap is there, but they don't touch each other because they're too messy, because they both know who they are secretly. And that's why you walk in the Wharton building, you just kind of look at people like, oh, okay, like that Goyard bag, that makes sense. And you go down to the art side and you're like, oh, those Blundstones make sense. But what do you do when someone's wearing Blundstones and have a Goyard bag? The precipice of like hybridity between the two, like, we don't know, right?
Yeah,
So,
the Canada Goose ties them both together.
exactly.
At least on Ben's campus.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've seen like quite a few things, and I remember being in New York a while back, and like walking in this gallery, and someone was like buying something, or someone was an assistant or something, and they had like a really expensive bag with them. And then I was like, what is going on? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And like, I go to my buddy's house in the Bronx, and like this dude is like doing all types of stuff, but yet he doesn't have the same access to capital as these other people. And, you know, I'll talk about Kanye and his company later, but to be honest, that's the only guy who's taken like his art and moved it into the mainstream by way of trying to build everything. Like, that's the only art and design firm I've ever seen, but I'm working on the next one now, but we'll see.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting, like thinking about like the model of like an art practice versus the model of a corporation, which is, you know, increase profits constantly no matter what. And it's how do those two models like relate to each other? I mean, if they do at all. Yeah.
I mean, let's think about like Kinde Wiley, right? I watched a documentary about Kinde Wiley and his factory in China that he's outsourced most of his painting to. If you scale that up to the size of like a Fortune 100 company, he's doing the same thing as everyone else. You know, he's just like an artist, and he's like the common good, you know, and he has his aesthetic, he has the look, he knows what he has the formula down. So, and he also has LLCs, because anyone gets hurt on that job, it's on him if he doesn't have the LLC. So his assets aren't wrapped up in the company, you know, his assets are his assets more than likely. So that's where it gets tricky, because the higher you get, the more complicated these things get. And I'm just trying to figure out what's happening before I get there, so I can at least understand that if I'm going to be scared and be up there, I at least have a sort of map. But yeah, I get jaded a lot about this. But
well, I think it's easy to.
Yeah, and I think what I hope, and that's why I went to cinema. Cinema it's relatively cheap. It's incredibly impactful. Hollywood can't contain it anymore. If we look at like things like Uber and the sharing economy or the gig economy, it's just the democratization of things that were like had like kind of like difficult regulations, right? They just kind of unregulated everything and democratized. And all Twitter is a soapbox democratized across the entire planet, right? So it's like everyone now has a soapbox, and it complicates everything. So in that sense, like what's going on with the art world? Like we think technology is not going to hit the art world, and like art is the same way. We have an issue, but I choose cinema because just the way those things have spread out, Netflix and Amazon and all these different players, that gives us as artists another way in, right? There's two ways in now. It's either just streaming or the old guard, right? But even there, I think what we can do for like the Commonwealth, the Republic, is a sort of jam-pack films with as much ideological like progression as possible. If we look at the apparatus theory is saying like, if you see it in film, it holds some sort of weight, essentially, right? Ideological views are inside of cinema. That's just why, and that's just what it is. My dad used to say this thing to this day. He was like, hey man, if you see it in the movies, you know it's out there. You see it in the movies, you know it's out there. And that's
That's
when
true, yeah.
When the pandemic hit, he was like, man, I've been telling you this for years, man. If it's in the movies, you know it's going to happen eventually. You know it's out there. And my dad's like, you know, it's kind of like goes back to Noam Chomsky talking about like 17th, 18th century like blacksmiths and artisans who would like have like, they were smarter than the aristocrats because they had like people reading to them as a kid. You know, they had like little like assistants reading to them as they worked, which was like, you know, a less like a more analog version of a podcast, right?
Totally.
So that's all it really is. So they were like always more in tune with like everything. And my dad saying that was like, okay, I was like, what do you like? Oh, like you see film as more of a container for culture, right? You see it as like this thing, this box that we're in with these like things. And like, if I put enough things into it, like representation matters, right? Representation does matter, but then also like who's behind that camera also. So then who's behind the guy that hires the guy for the camera, or the gal that hires, or whomever who operates that camera. And like, that's the point where I'm like, okay, we got to do something there, because what Black people have done in music is what's going to happen in cinema next. Because we just haven't had that tool, right? But we've always been interested. Like, have you seen the intro to Belly?
Yes. Oh my God.
That was Hype Williams' first film.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Hype went crazy. First film. Yeah. DMX is in, and Nas. He didn't even have like real actors, right? Mm-hmm. It went crazy. It's a classic. It's only a matter of time, because the pressure that we put on music, we cannot put that pressure. We cannot sustain that amount of pressure on Black music for that long. And I'm really with like Jatavi and Arthur about those things. And it's pretty tough. Yeah.
And I think it is, I mean, exactly what you're saying. It like many of the most kind of like, many of the Black artists that people are kind of engaging with the most are working in the mediums of film and video. Like you mentioned Jatavia, you mentioned Arthur Jaffa, Martine Sims obviously does a lot of video work, and it's clearly, it's because it is, I don't know, it's such an immediate way to transmit a message, right? It's like the medium is the message, right?
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, like everything you've been talking about, I think is so relevant to your work too, especially Guillotine, which we'll watch a little bit of in a minute, which I see is very heavily influenced by Arthur Jaffa, which is kind of exactly what you're describing about like video and film as container for culture. And when you really kind of like fill that container to the brim is what Arthur Jaffa does. It kind of is an assault on the senses, and it overloads you with ideas and forces you to kind of like try to draw a through line through all these varied things that he's showing you. And ultimately it creates this overarching sense of what he's trying to convey to you in his work. And I think obviously do you want to speak to his influence or what you think of his work at all?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, so I'll start with like the power of cinema for sure. Like I've always been interested in cinema because I just watched so many movies, and the easiest way for me to make films were to make images first. So if I, scale that out, like I'll eventually make full-length movies, right, one day. Mm-hmm. But the thing that was very easy for me to go to cinema was because I also have like a very acute senses to rhythm, right, and beats. Saying that's all like editing really is. It's just like rhythm.
Absolutely.
And then I was thinking about the structures of like jazz music, right, where when you listen to jazz music, Miles Davis is playing a note and it's and it drops out, and it just, and you're just like, what just happened, right? And everything's gone, everything falls away. And then if you listen to Frank Ocean, he did the same thing with like the switch and nights, where like everything disappears. And you're like, okay, what do I do with that? And it's
or house music,
right? Yeah, house music, the same thing, right? Where it's like, okay, what do I now do with the fact that this song completely changed, but it's so pleasant? It's like such a good surprise that you can enjoy it. So that kind of rhythm was easy for me to like move into it, because I don't know what it is. You can look up babies on YouTube, like little Black babies on YouTube, and you play a beat and they'll wake up out of their sleep just going at it. And it's just like, why is that the thing, right? Or why Simone Biles so good at doing backflips and staying on beat. Like, we don't know, right? Those are things that are culturally something that we do, but I don't really know. But I think looking at Arthur Jaffa, he was the first person I saw who made a film that seemed like it was all found footage. And it was so, it was just so, its structure was so solid for me. Like, it was able to hold everything inside of it. Am I kind of disappointed he put like all of Black history in like a 7-minute video almost? Yeah, I think that's kind of annoying. And do I think the stakes were kind of low for him in some ways? Yeah, but I can't really say that because I know he shot some of it, so I don't really know. But the one thing I will say is the feeling I get from it, it's pretty visceral. And he said it himself. He said, I feel like I just finished Ultra Light Beam. And to finish is like to make a video for it, like no music's really done until you got a video for it, and that's people's desire for like a complete sensory experience rather than a one-dimensional experience. Like, that's what auto-tune is so interesting. The irregularities that are happening within the sounds are just like nothing that we can register in the day-to-day life. It's just constantly moving in and out and trying to correct oneself, and its inability to correct is its ability to affect in a lot of ways. So I think that influence of Jaffa and Jatavia and Khalil Joseph was like, oh wait, there are no rules in cinema anymore. Because before, like, I didn't grow up on Ingmar Bergman, but I do watch Ingmar Bergman now. Like, I didn't grow up on Jean-Luc Godard. In my first year of grad school, I remember David Hart was like, yeah, go watch Medium Cool. And I was like, yo, this sucks. But I wasn't ready for it, I wasn't making films. And then I remember like making my film and going back and being like, oh, this makes sense now. Like, this really makes sense. And I think for a lot of people, the entryway into cinema is rhythm. Like, you can feel the film like right away, and that there's nothing coming. So I guess with Arthur Jaffa's piece, it was so pleasant. It was very beautiful and very pleasant. But I was in a very dark place in grad school. It was just like, it was like the toughest time of my life because a lot of the things, like, I'm an athlete, right? Like, I was a rower. I won a state championship. Like, I did all these things, and like, definite lines are very like clear to me. But within the art world, there's so much interpretation that I would get so angry. It's like, why aren't people talking during my crit? Like, why? Like, what's happening here? Like, what is going on? And I'm just like, what is violence that you can't see? And I would like my work ethic was sick in grad school. Like, I woke up every day at 6 a.m., went to the gym for 2 hours, and I didn't listen to music at the gym. Like, I listened to the entire queer phenomenology breakdown of that book every day at the gym. And then I would do that with Foucault. Whoa. Right, I would do that with Foucault. I would do that with Freud. I would do that with everything, Durkheim. I did that with everything I could. And like, Ken Lum used to be like, oh, like, Sonny, you're reading like Durkheim right now, right? I was like, yeah. But I'm like, no, actually, I'm finishing entire books in like 4 or 5 days because I'm not listening to music anymore. I'm only listening to theory because I had to like arm myself. I had to understand where I was trying to come from. And I guess in about a year, I got up to speed, and it was really tough. But that film, Guillotine, was meant to be as visceral, and everything that you saw was supposed to be unexpected. Like, I wanted you to be completely uncomfortable as I was every single second of that film. And there's no way out. It's just you in that film for what, 22 minutes or something like that? Yeah, 22 minutes. It's actually the duration of like a Friends episode. Like, just me and you for 22 minutes. And you go deal with it all. And like, I just had to put all the anger in there. So that's
the incredible, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just saying.
Incredible hyper-personal ending too. We'll post a link to this, Sonny's latest piece, Guillotine. But just to like, not to fully spoil the ending, but you insert yourself at the end in a Q&A. And this, I mean, it's a really incredible kind of artistic gesture.
Yeah.
The way
It's like
you
a-
include
it's a
yourself in there
super-
being documented by someone else, right? By the
Yeah.
people who are
Yeah.
filming this Q&A panel with Kanye West. And
yeah.
it's incredibly emotional. And I mean, it is, yeah, I mean, I don't know that anyone could really watch that and not tear up a little or feel some serious emotion. And I think it's really like, again, it's what you're talking about. It isn't a perfect resolution, right? It doesn't feel like it's an answer to the questions that you've been raising, but I think it introduces a lot of new questions that kind of leave you wanting to rewatch it again and see like, oh, can I glean some new answers this time? Maybe if I watch the piece again, will the sequencing make more sense? Will it seem more purposeful? Will one clip speak to another in a way I didn't see before? I mean, it's a really, it's a really powerful piece. I recommend that everyone watch that.
Yeah.
Natalie posted it in the chat.
Do you want to show a clip of it now?
Yeah. We'll show a couple minutes. I won't spoil the ending. I feel like, people.
Yeah, maybe show a
Well,
minute or two.
I didn't, I just set it up a little bit, but
I will say there is a part where like someone's talking about their dad, and it cuts to a thing in the sky, and I was just like I don't know, like I don't know any Black people who have power, right? Like I don't know Black people who have power, like Department of Justice power, Department of Defense kind of power, like Colin Powell level power. Like that's just like not normal in my life, right? But I know a lot of different kinds of power, like in Chicago. Like if my mom usually says this thing, which is like, I remember something happened, or my dad, one of them said like, hey, what's going on, man? He's like, I didn't hear from you. I was like, oh, I'm good. He was like, I thought something happened to you. I was about to make a couple phone calls. And I'm like, make a couple phone calls. I was like, he was like, all right, I'm just making sure. I'm like, who are you? With like that kind of fear of like, that's a phone call you don't want to make. So that was also in my head when I was like making this, but I'll show about 3 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Greeting that we don't want to lose dominance, we don't want to lose power, we don't want to lose privileges, we don't want to lose benefits that the system of white supremacy has created here in America for white people. We don't want to lose none of it. We're scared. We're scared of Black retribution. We're scared of Black vengeance.
Real. You can let that shit out, man. You got a son to look up to, man. I know you lost your brother. You lost your cousin. That shit hurt. You can cry, man. Niggas look at it as, if a nigga cry, niggas look at you as a bitch. But deep down inside, God look at you as pride and that you hurt and you need love. Man, you don't have to hide shit from nobody. Be yourself. I'm sorry that happened to you, man. But man, please don't go shoot that block up, man. It's kids out there. It's kids that got lives like the people you lost have lives.
Come on. Got a big game today. Big game today, right? You still mad at me? Huh? For what? You alright? No, you ain't, sucker. Yeah, big game today. Big game today. Oh, I gotta get something out the trunk. Go get that bag for me out the trunk. Yeah. What? It ain't over? Go get that box out of there for me. Shit. Happy birthday. Don't cry. You're about to make me cry. Don't cry. Pull it out. Let the world see it. I ain't forget about you.
Yeah. I want to see some home runs. I love you. Don't cry. Let me see. Let me see you post up with it. How you gonna knock it out the ball? There you go. Right. Yup. Happy birthday. That bat. That's the bat you wanted, right? Give me some. Give me some. I love you. All right. We gonna go to this game and hit some home runs, right? That's right.
We're scared shitless, and we always have been. Since day one, we put our hands on black people.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty interesting, man. So, Swinger, so were you like chasing around a lot of black prior to the business?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
As best I could. Kind of hard to find sometimes, at least really good. But now that I'm hooked up with the whole crew here, no problems.
Awesome. That's a pretty interesting story, man. So, like, what is it in particular that attracts you to black men? Why is your preference black men?
Oh, where do I even start? Well, the cock size is always fantastic, and just the presence and the way that they handle me. I love to be handled, and they can do it just absolutely perfect. They
Wow.
treat me like a perfect little whore, and I love it.
Wow. Do you remember, like, the first time you had black dick?
Absolutely,
Really?
without a doubt.
Was it like in high school, junior high? What was
No,
it?
actually, no. It was after I was married. Hadn't really even
Really?
considered it. I had a black boyfriend when I was in junior high, but yeah, it wasn't until after I was married, and it was a close friend of my husband's, and he made a comment about my ass one night at a football game, and I just, oh, he's interested? Well, now I'm interested. So we played around for a bit, and yeah, it was great.
I mean, but like you had no inclination, so like I'm saying, what was like the impetus and make you like what made you curious, so to speak?
Oh, well, I always thought he was, I mean, just completely attractive, and his whole attitude. And that's the thing for me. That's what gets me there is
Okay.
the good attitude. And I knew he would have a great attitude in bed, and he was. It was awesome.
Wow, that's funny, man. Awesome stuff.
Grabbed them, snatched them up, put them on a boat, and made them our own fucking personal slaves and assistants for no pay. We did all that. You goddamn right, we're scared.
I think that's a good part to stop.
Yeah, and that's just a very small part of the whole film. Again, it's 22 minutes, and yeah, these vignettes have like a really cumulative effect of I guess, yeah, I mean, showing dichotomies, but also just like black vulnerability and emotions that, I mean, that baseball clip is incredible. I love that clip so much. And then there's this through line of this guy, this white man who's talking about he's giving kind of an iPhone like just rant about just, you know, the truth about you know, racism in the US. So do you want to just talk very briefly about guillotine and that clip?
Yeah, yeah, Dixon White is really great because let me take a step back. So there's this piece by Arthur J. I never saw, and I what I learned in grad school was like, don't say too much, right? But I feel like in this case I want to, right? It's like for the people, and I kind of want to pay homage. But within black music or music in general, things are sampled, and like we see, like, you know, there'd be like a cover and things like that, right? So in many ways, a piece I never saw, but it affected me really great was that clip of Dixon White. And I saw it before I saw a clip of Arthur Jafa's piece. But Arthur Jafa had like these like blue things and red things on the side of it. I was like, I don't want all of that, because I was really interested. I projected one of my films in a space, and when the Instagram or like whatever like media that you play on, when it's in that black box in an all black area, it just floats in space, and you just confronted with it, and it's just there on a wall 40 by 40, but completely framed by the kind of darkness, right? And to choose him was just like, I mean, I feel like being at like Penn or like on the East Coast or any like liberal enclave, this sort of like neoliberal patina that kind of occurs, but people aren't unhinged the same way that he is, where he's just like, good luck. We did some crazy shit to these people, and I hope we don't continue. And like that's the kind of like thing you never hear. You don't hear that.
You don't hear it on the news.
In the original clip too, at one point he's like, "Yeah, I was racist. Not proud of it, but I was racist." Like he's being very unvarnished in a way that you would never get from a very kind of like, again, like you said, like a manicured neoliberal institution where even admitting to that much would kind of be like a bridge too far for a lot of people who kind of traffic in an air of anti-racism.
Yeah, and the constant tiptoeing, around everything, trying to soften. Again, there's the softening.
Yeah,
but,
I can almost deal with him more because he's like, "Yeah, I was racist." All right, because like honestly, like, what are you gonna do? Like, what are you gonna do? He's racist. What are you gonna do? Like, that's the thing that's terrible about racism is like, what do I do now? Like how do I like give this person consequence to the thing that happened, right? And that's like what I kind of wanted to do, was just like expose him, but like also like put him in a space where it's just like where white people will be. You know what I mean? Because if he's allowed to be there where white people are, then so is the guy with the dreads, right? And so are the black men in groups dancing, right? And so should the guy who's talking to his son saying, "Let the world see." Well, let's show the world, And then in the situation with the white woman saying all the things that she said, we also have to like kind of like dig a little bit deeper in that instance where like the black vulnerability was occurring at that moment with that woman as well, which he probably never expected her to end up saying all these things in this platform or this form, right? So it's like how would he have known she was that way, And like that's the thing I was interested in any sort of relationship. Is just the things you cannot not tell someone. Like eventually you have to, but then also there's the things that you just can't tell anyone. And what are you willing to do to tell people the things that you shouldn't? Like what did she get out of that? Like if anything. But it's a very like weird film in that regard. And similar to Godspeed, I was in a place where I had to like, I was trying to like make a film to get out of a situation. And also, since I was like talking about sports earlier, I'm highly not necessarily highly competitive with other people, but I'm highly competitive with myself and like my real politic of my situation. Because like at the end, like that guillotine was finished in like, I would say May, and I was working a lot with Matt Friedman. And I was really angry because people were just like, "What do I do?" Like in my cohort, like, "What do I do? I don't have a studio. I don't have scanners. I don't have this. I don't have that." And I was like, "Well, guess it's time to pivot to a different medium." Because I was about to do a performance in May, and I was like planning it out. I had like the song, I had the equipment. I was working with my friend Maria Murphy about synthesizers and all these things, and I was ready. Like I was about to do it. I just had a few more things to tighten up, and a pandemic came, knocked me off. And I was like, okay, I'm stuck inside. I have a pre-existing condition with asthma. I shouldn't be outside. I'm going to make a film. I'm going to make a film by not leaving my house. And I just start compiling obsessively over and over and over and over again. And I was just like, I'm gonna show up to thesis with something. Like you don't get to graduate, a master's program at that kind of institution with nothing. And I've never been a person who would show up somewhere with nothing. I was like, we're gonna make it work. We're gonna make it work whatever way we can. And if it's, thrown up against a couple things together and just trying to like figure out why I'm doing that, that's what I'll do. Right. If it's about digging deeper, that's what I'll do. If I don't have to sleep, that's what you got to do. But I've been in a situation where that's just my life, right? So
Right.
I know a lot of people get MFAs because it's more time and space to take care of oneself in practice. But for me, this was like going to the army. Like this was like, I got to leave this place better than I came in.
Yeah.
And I did.
Right.
Sense of
And
urgency to it.
That also reminds me of actually a scene in Godspeed where you're talking to, I think it's a friend of yours who's a rapper, and he says content is everything.
Yeah.
Because content is always a good thing. So that kind of the drive to, or the hustle or the drive to be constantly, you know, making and improving and showing up. That makes me think of that.
That's just life for me, you know. I just like the situation. But I think question, like
Yeah, we should move on to the
let's go to
Q&A.
that
was
question.
a fantastic discussion. So
yeah,
we have a
thank
few
you so
here.
much.
We have one. Okay, Natalie, I think reposted the main question that we got. Should we read it out loud? That makes sense for everyone?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you think you could talk about the moments before and after capturing the shots in Godspeed? Do you consider this piece documentary, video art, or something else? In Godspeed, just after we see your family cooking pasta and chicken, there's a jump cut to another dinner setting with the family carefully plating a meal.
Oh yeah, we should talk.
Can you talk about the contrast between these two scenes and what you are showing between them? And this is, again, I think this is, for people that watch Godspeed, this sticks in everyone's mind.
Yeah, it's the pivotal scene.
Well, yeah. That's probably Mitch. That's Mitch. I know that's me. So that scene, I didn't realize that was gonna happen that way until I started like assembling it, right? So when I was in my family's crib, I was just like, there's always been so much noise. And it's just like someone yelling over there about Tanisha, and then there's chicken going. It's just like, check them peas. And it's just like, oh God, like what the fuck is going on? And it's like Thanksgiving, and people drinking, they having fun, they laughing. And it's kind of like what you see in cinema sometimes, where it's just like these black families like really getting down with each other, like moving around, doing things. And then my other side of like my family, like my really great family friends, like I live with them, like I spend a lot of time with them. They took me in when I needed some help because like my housing situation like fell through. It was just bad. And I like moved in with them for a bit, but I was there for Thanksgiving. And yeah, it was just like white truffle risotto night. And I was just like, and I remember like, I was like walking on eggshells because like there was more than just like the immediate family there. And I'd be like, yo, like this is crazy. But they're so used to me with a camera, and I just started filming. I was like, okay. And I didn't realize the silence until later, like, because that says a lot about, like, for me, that always says a lot about people's ability to live a certain kind of life. You know, like what kind, like the aesthetic qualities of your home is very, very particular, right? It's very particular in the ways in which you set up a place and its kind of proximity to other objects in that space to give more meaning to the set space, right? And when you do that, it creates a kind of like environment that may or may not be yours. And even if you're in that environment, you're implicated by that environment. So being in there and being from a culture that's like very much like expressive, and to be in an environment that felt very non-expressive felt really weird, but also kind of affirming, where I was like, okay, I don't have to worry about the peas burning. I don't have to worry about Tanisha coming over, right? It was just like, it was like weirdly secure, where like, it could be that quiet. It can't always be that quiet. But like, I don't know any times where there's no music playing in my family's house. You know, I don't know where there's not like Stairway to Heaven playing on like radio, right? And I know that life, but like to be in both of those situations is to talk about the complexities of like one, blackness and class. Like what happens when you enter that room and you learn about white truffle risotto, but then go back to your auntie house. Like you're not going to be, I remember going to a Michelin star restaurant once and then going to my grandma's house afterwards. And then like trying to like talk to my family about like what just happened. I was like, yeah, there's like this Michelin star, and like they had one, and she's like a female chef. Like, what? Like, y'all heard of this thing? Like, boy, we don't know what you're talking about. Come on now, come get some meat. And I'm like, okay, like, fine, I guess, like, whatever. And like, I moved on, right? But then I was like, but it really stuck with me because the alienation, right? People really like that or feel that because they're radically alienated from anything around that film that has any legibility, right? Like if we look at it in a more like linguistic way, like there's like words just dropped off, and like people start using Z's instead of S's, right? You're like, whoa, what's going on here? And that's what kind of happened in that phase where it's just like everything you learned up until that moment in that film, because you're learning, you know, you're picking up on things as you move, like, oh, Black people having a good time, good old time. And then all of a sudden, just like white truffle, you're like, wait a minute, they're not supposed to be around this. Because like our implicit bias is like, truthfully, it's like, what is these niggas doing near this truffle? How did they get truffle in the same house? Whose house is this? This can be their house, because their house doesn't look like that, right? So it's also about like,
all the mental loops you're jumping through.
Well, it's also how you reinforce those class distinctions too, is by having these the mystery of these things, right? It's like you don't learn what a Michelin star is in school. Like that's not part of your formal education, right? So in order to be inducted into that, like that strata, right, there are all these things that you need to implicitly know that you have no way of knowing unless this is just the environment that you've grown up in.
Right. And it's like,
I also,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just from a formal standpoint, I also think it's interesting that scene, which is very short, it's only like a couple shots. You never see the faces of anyone at that dinner. And was that an intentional choice, or is it just like the shots that you got? Or,
I mean, come on now, I'm implicated in this life too, right? Like, people. Right.
I guess.
Yeah.
It was more of just a wanting to be shown respect out of respect.
It was respect. Like if you look at, I think someone named Buck Ellison, who has this book called Living Trust, and he makes pictures about wealth and white people and all around the country and stuff like that. And there's a privacy, right? And like I have to also respect that, right? Because I remember like the one time I took pictures on that side of my family house, they were like, no pictures. No, but only below. And I was just like, okay, like that's fine.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I'm just like, okay, like I'll do that because that's, I got to respect what you are. Right. And it was very short. There's no names. There's like a name and like, that's about it. And I put it in there because I'm in that space. Like if I didn't want to be a part of that, I wouldn't go there. But there's also a desire for being like a working class kid to be there. And I've learned these things, and now it's like very complicated. Like that's like, I would talk to Ken Lum about these things a lot, which is like, he was at a dinner once, he was telling me, and he didn't know what an oyster fork was, and the collector wouldn't talk to him for the whole dinner.
Oh my God.
Right. And that's the art world.
Holy shit.
How does a little Black working class kid from Chicago get up to speed? And I learned, if I like it or not, capitalism or not, there's a game that's always running, and I have to like be astute, right? It's like, you don't say you're a member of the club, you say you belong to said club. Like I belong to the Penn Club or the Yale.
Damn.
We'll go hit the back nine and have an extravagant weekend, and we'll be at the top of everyone around us. And then we'll go back, have a couple Aperol Spritz, and move along, have a night, and then dinner and no boo later this evening. Yeah, that's the shit, right? You know, like that's where everybody, like it's like watching Mad Men. You know, it's like, oh fuck, what's going on? But no real legibility.
Yeah.
I think there was one more.
We got
one more. Yeah.
We have time for one more question. I think we got one about this one about.
Yeah. What place does religion or the aesthetics of it have in your practice? And, you know, we've got the crosses in the beginning. I think ICA and us, we use those images, the screenshots of that in the promotion.
Yeah. And the angels.
The angels.
Well, gospel music was like founded in Chicago on the South Side in Bronzeville. So there's a really big like Southern draw in Chicago. Like it's kind of like a hospitality city, like very passive aggressive in some ways, but they'll be nice to you for sure. And I grew up Christian. I went to the church like right down the street from here. And I was always fascinated by the aesthetic qualities of the church and like the music and like the sounds and like everyone was welcome. But also I never really fit in because I remember a kid getting his ass whooped after church. And I was like, wait, that's not godly. Like, what's going on? And then I was just like, hey, he should never did what he did. But anyways, you know, that was a lot for me to like understand. And religion, it's always like, it's kind of like Robert Mapplethorpe pictures. Like, he was implicated by religion his whole life. And then when he started making work, it's trying to reach a place outside of it. You see the same thing with Sally Mann's photographs, which is like, it's trying to reach a divine. But more importantly, my largest influence of being Frank Ocean, which is like, that guy he gets spiritual all the time. And it's just like, I'm always trying to ascend. I'm always trying to ascend. Or I'm either trying to ascend or I'm trying to take you deep down into hell with me, wherever I am. Like, we're gonna go to hell together.
Yeah.
We're gonna be there for a while. So like, get ready, you know, which is what guillotine is. But with the other one, it's just like, I want enough emotionality to affect you and to be thrown off and be like, this kid is sad. It's kind of like listening to Sick Free by Frank Ocean. It's the saddest song I've ever heard. But like, was he sad when he made it? I don't know, you know, but religion is important. I'm more agnostic. There's something out there, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah. But when you grow up with it, it's impossible to not be affected by it, you know, especially if you become an artist, because then you grow up surrounded by iconography. You grow up surrounded by things like music that creates a feeling, speech that creates a feeling, things that are all meant to kind of point to some higher transcendental state, like you were saying, like looking for the divine. Yeah. I think that is a powerful thing to recognize in your work.
Yeah. We got one more, I think.
We have time for one more question, I think. It's talking about the baseball clip and guillotine. In the baseball clip, there's so many issues wrapped up in it, even though it's very touching because the dad is showing him he cares. I end up feeling sad that they both can't fully enjoy the moment and be more vulnerable because the dad only knows how to engage emotionally in this really limited way. I'm curious where exactly your interest in this clip is located and if this is what resonated with you the most as well.
Yeah, I think that clip resonates with me a lot. Because I think my dad was very much that way, where, you know, he took me to baseball games, he took me to football games, you know, and things like that. And he was always there for me. He was always there for me in a very like I was always under his wings, right? But the interesting thing about my dad is he's a very like metrosexual individual who's like, man, you gotta smell good, man. We're gonna go out tonight, get cleaned up, we're gonna do the whole thing. And that kind of relationship is like, it's really fond in my mind, but also like most of the patriarchal things I learned is from my mom who's over there. Because it's just like, what, you go over there. It's from her, right? Because it's just like, she's in the business world, you know, and it's just like, you have to cut certain things off. And it only makes sense within a patriarchal society like the one we live in. And in most societies, right? The only way to kind of like survive is that to regurgitate some things. And I was always I'm very sensitive. I'm an incredibly sensitive person. And for me, like I saw me when I saw that kid. I was a nerdy, like overweight kid with a gap and wearing glasses and didn't get cool till grad school. But like being in that scene, I was like in that scene. And like my dad calls me bro now, you know, like my dad's like, hey, what up, bro? What's going on? I'm like, nigga, what? I'm your son. Like, but like, there's a like I hit an age where it's like, all right, man, I'm gonna tell you how it is. And it's just like, that's how it is. But I'm really fond of that scene. And because you don't see, like, Hollywood doesn't depict black fathers like that because it's too clean. You know, it's like too made up. And like that was completely real. It's like, hey man, what's going on with you, man? You thought I forgot about your birthday, huh? Yeah. Go in the back. Surprise. And like you can't do more than one take of that. And that's the thing about like that kind of like everything you saw in Godspeed, everything in there was shot once. That's it. You only get one take because it's like, that's just reality, man. Like,
yeah, it's not real the second take. Yeah.
It's just like, I don't care about making images. I'm more of a Dado Moriyama provoke Japanese, like influenced by. I want to go into the place that's not, I'm not supposed to be in. I want to see the things that are more abstract, and I don't really have any desire to make things that are clean or like fine, you know, art with a capital A, which is, at least in grad school, is what I learned is very important to people. It's like art with a capital A. It's like, I want to get messy. I want to get real messy. And people, and I think people look to artists for leadership because we can get messy. Like I like to get messy and nasty and just see what comes of it. And that guillotine came out of that. And this time, I don't know what's coming next, but I'm working with some Polaroids and stuff like that now. But yeah. Any more questions?
Well, we're excited to see that.
Yeah, we're looking forward to
I don't think we have any more questions, so I think we should.
Oh, I think there was one more. There was one more. John said about the camera work was very controlled. Formally inform.
I don't think there was a question there.
Okay.
But it's just a comment.
Oh, thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, so Michael, do you want to introduce next week really quick?
Yeah, next week's conversation will be with Matt Levine. His video Collision Gripper will be premiering next Monday. Are you doing that discussion, Matt?
Yeah, I'm doing that, and also it's me and Marcus.
So Matt and Marcus will be taking that. And we do have a survey as well on the ICA website that we'll put in the, Natalie put it in the chat already. Oh, wait, no.
Yeah, it's in the chat.
There it is. Cool. There it is to all the attendants. That was just us.
Just want to say thanks.
Give us our thoughts
thanks
at the
again
forum.
to Sonnie.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Sonnie.
Thank you so much, Sonnie. This was so good. Had a great time. Thanks.
Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. It's my first opportunity, and I'm glad it's with y'all. I'm never gonna forget this. Everyone.
First of many.
Thank you. Thank you so much again, Mike, and all the attendees. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonnie.
Great. Yeah, and thank you for everyone who attended.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
We hope you continue to attend because we have a very interesting mix of artists, interesting mix of work. Keep tuning into the website every week.
7 more weeks.
7 more weeks, yeah. All right, well, good luck with everything, Sonnie. Good luck with all your future work. Good luck with the teaching. Yes. Good luck in Chicago. Godspeed.
Godspeed to you. Okay, we brought it full circle. Yeah. Yep. There we go.
I'll see y'all later.
Right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.